evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome to one more edition of the book club this evening. And today we are very fortunate to have the author of the book that we are discussing with us. So she will tell us about it herself. And what could be better than that? Priya, this is Priya Hajela. She is the author of the book Ladies Tailor, which we are taking up today. And very fortunately, she has agreed to be here with us. So Priya, now the blurb on the book tells us that this is a second career for you. Writing is not what you've always done, but it is something that you have now begun to do. So although this is not your first book, but tell us, how did you start writing? How did you decide to write?
So it is my first book. I have written some short stories. Some short stories have been published. This is my first full-length novel. Mm-hmm. And so what I did actually, I worked for 22 years in corporate America and then corporate India. I have an MBA. And so I've done, all those sorts of marketing, HR, all sorts of roles. And 8 years ago is when I thought that it was time to do something different. And it was also, financially, we were kind of at a place where I could venture off and, do something. It was also something that I really needed to do. It's a very personal reason why I took to writing. And that is related to my mother. My mother was bipolar, and my parents separated when I was 8 and my sister was 5, and we were sent off to boarding school at that time. And we've just had a very I've had a very difficult time dealing with her illness. We lost her in 2020, not to COVID. She just had a heart attack, but so I really felt like I needed to understand. I avoided her as much as I could. When I was 17 and my sister 14, my father took us to America, and we kind of abandoned her. We did not. She was with her mother, but we didn't tell her where we were going because it was just a very difficult thing for me to deal with. And he thought that would be the best thing for me to do is, for me to grow as a person, I would need to be away from her. So the first thing I wrote, and the reason I took to writing, I actually went back to school and got an MFA. I went back to a low residency MFA program in the US. And because I wanted to do it right, I wanted to, I wanted to treat it actually as truly a second career. Mm-hmm. And so when I was at my MFA program, a 2-year program, the story I wrote was my mother's story as my thesis. So we had to write a 200-page thesis as part of the program, and we worked towards it over the course of the 2 years with a lot of reading and a lot of annotating and a lot of practicing and so on. But that's the story I wrote first, and the reason I wrote it is because I really wanted to understand what she went through and why and how. And I didn't do any research. It wasn't like I had people to talk to because there was nobody really around. Her parents and her sister, siblings, a lot of them had passed away. But I just really tried to get into her head to figure out what she went through. So that's when I started writing. I haven't published that. It's a collection of connected short stories is the way I wrote it. I haven't published that. But once I finished with it, I set it aside. And then I said, okay, now I want to write something else and something else that I really want to get into. So I think what I realized also is that what I write is things I want to understand. My grandparents came from Pakistan. They were, they had to move at the time of partition, and they set up home in first in a place called Jagadri and then later on in Ludhiana. And my grandmother had no cupboards in her house. She had a room with trunks, and she kept all her clothes in those trunks. And that's how, I mean, that's how she lived. And every time, the clothes would be washed, they would be put back into the trunk, and then she would take it out, and then, whatever she needed, and use it. So I used to ask her about it, and she's like, ki pata, kithe kennu, jana pega, and all this. And and they wouldn't explain what actually happened. None of them would, and neither my grandfather nor my grandmother. I do remember that they used to have this, we lived in a big joint family in Ludhiana, and they used to have this thing called, they used to call it Singh Sabha. And there was a group of people, a community of people who had come from Pakistan, and they would meet. I think it was monthly or something like that. And, samosas would come and pakoras would come and all that. And of course, we as little children, we would keep, grabbing a bite here. And sometimes I would sit with my grandmother and listen. And they would talk about the old times. And that is, but those things, it didn't register. They used to actually go back to their village dialect, Gujar Khani. And I couldn't understand much Punjabi anyway, because, we kind of grew up speaking English and Hindi. But I wanted to know. So that was kind of why I wrote this book, more to understand, but not necessarily to write about partition. I wanted to understand it, and then I wanted to kind of write about what happens after. Once people moved here, what happened to them? So that was kind of the basis for the book.
Right, yes. Did you find that earlier short fiction that you wrote helped you when you started this larger project of a full featured novel?
So, the short fiction has actually, I kind of developed a style, a kind of a trademark. I have, and some people have been very unhappy with me. I have a few reviews, and people have personally kind of written to me and been annoyed with me, because I leave things to the reader's imagination. I do a lot of resolution and reversal. I like those surprises. I like a shocking, surprising ending. And though I practice that in my short stories. So if you find my short stories and you read them, you will find so what I learned from those is what I like to write, but to write it in long form was quite challenging, because you do have to keep thinking about you've got like layers of the story where you're holding things back and sharing, and holding things back and sharing as you go along. And then finally you have sort of, there were 2 or 3 things that everybody hasn't read the book, so I'm not going to give some of those things away.
Spoiler alerts, yes. But of course, it's a matter of sustaining, what you're doing for a much longer space. So of course it is more challenging.
Yeah.
The title, Priya, the title is so light-hearted. Ladies Tailor, and all the jokes attached therein, as it were, come to mind promptly. And when I saw the book, I thought I recognized it as a very light-hearted something. And the sewing machine, the old style sewing machine, clearly was a retro image, So I said, a long time ago, but Ladies Tailor, it'll be fun. And it was an easy read. It is an easy read, I will say. You want to continue. It is easy to turn the page and carry on. So that is definitely there. But the content belies the title, I felt. That although there is lightheartedness, but by and large, it's a serious book.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah. It is a serious book. And, particularly, when the his parents' story comes into the picture, and the context, and, the kind of life that they're trying to create, the backdrop of the life, of the life that they're trying to create. That's serious. That's intense.
Now, you've chosen to locate your story in the historical period of the partition. And, that's such an emotive setting for any Indian or Pakistani, I should imagine. So the moment we start reading about the partition, things become so charged. We have read so much about it, we've heard so much about it, it becomes automatically emotional, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, against the background of the enormous um, amount of partition literature that we have, was it at all daunting to use this yet again? Did you think it would pitch you to be compared with other writers of the partition? Other books like Train to Pakistan, I mean, Ice Candy Man, and all those?
Yeah, so I mean, I read everything that I could get my hands on, and interestingly, there's Gulzar's short stories, there's Manto's short stories, there's Train to Pakistan, there's Ice Candy Man, and then there's nonfiction. So there's Tamas, the play, and
Tamas.
yeah. So there is, and what I did was, I read everything. I did a lot of research,
How
and I read all the
particular
fiction.
were you about historical correctness? How particular have you been?
No, I wasn't. So my intent. So this is something that's a great question that I have really pondered in my mind. And as I write my next novel, I'm doing the same thing. What I wanted to do was to paint the backdrop, like on a stage. And then I have my characters kind of moving in front of that backdrop. The backdrop doesn't change. The backdrop is fixed. I have references to a few historical events which are accurate. But for the most part, the characters kind of stand in front of that backdrop. So what I say is that I'm writing dramatic fiction in a historical setting rather than historical fiction.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yes.
And the example, I think the example that I give is these two books I read by Alif Shafak. One is The 40 Rules of Love, and the other one is Island of Missing Trees. One is dramatic fiction set in a historical setting, that is Island of Missing Trees. So it's set in the Civil War in Cyprus. The second one is about Rumi, very much a historical figure, and is historical fiction, which is then accurate to 1200 so and so and 1300 so and so, and then Shams dies and so on. And so it's a little, I what I think that I'm trying to do is to create that backdrop, to be true to it, but not be like stuck on events and dates. And
so let's say that having picked your backdrop, which is fairly familiar to the Indian reader, and so you remind us of what it was like in those days, but your concern is not merely painting that backdrop, but telling us a story against that backdrop.
Yes.
And your main concern is, your plot, which is to do with that lady's Tailor.
Yes.
Right? And the other characters.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
right.
Would you like to just tell us a little bit about the storyline?
Okay.
Just give us an idea, because some people today haven't. I know that some people have not read the book. They will get an idea. I'm not asking you to give away your surprises or any such thing. Just give us an idea, please.
Okay. So the story is really just about a cohort, a group of people who have separately moved from various parts of Pakistan and have ended up in Delhi in a refugee camp. And because of certain events, they kind of come together, and everybody's looking, to figure out what next, and how do they restart their lives? How do they, sort of get going again? And so I have, a few things that I did a fair amount of research on, like khadi. And interestingly, khadi, which was, Gandhiji's trademark fabric and so on, had actually lost its luster over, the next 5 or 6 years after his death. next, that period. So that's where I say I'm kind of like a little flexible on the precise timelines, but khadi had lost its luster. But it was still something that you could kind of draw people to and say it's our national, it's a symbol and so on. And so these guys, they say, we will make clothing out of khadi, and that's what we're going to sell. So that's the business they start. And over a period of time, they do very well with that business. But then there is this sort of hankering. So a few things that I personally, I mean, obviously what I write is, what I believe in and so on. So there is a thing about change. There is, you have to keep changing and moving. And so these guys are doing well, but I want this to move forward with their sort of need for more, something more. And that something more in this case is embroidery. And so they have, the main character, Gurdev, has to be convinced he's not the lady's tailor, but he imbibes the business, and he kind of like just takes it on, and like he is a lady's tailor, and he's convinced that, okay, yes, we are going to find these embroidery boys who are in Pakistan and who've been stuck, and who Nirmal knows, and they're like his children, and we are going to go after them and find them and so on. So basically the story then evolves from the backdrop of Partition to a backdrop of an adventure. So it's kind of and there's a little bit of romance, and there is this adventure of going behind. Sorry.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And the whole thing of needing to go into Pakistan. Now they have just come out. Gurdev has come out of Pakistan, right? He's been in a refugee camp. And times are still very troubled, but he decides he needs to go back. So there's all that courage, the strategy, the planning, and as you call it, an adventure. I mean, getting into Pakistan and coming back out. My goodness. So that is what all the strategy is about. Okay. And as you say, there are some surprises along the way, and especially at the end, massive surprise indeed. So I have some questions about particular characters and happenings, but I think at this point, I would like to open up the discussion to the others present. So let's see what other people have to say. Yes, so who's ready to join in, folks? Who would like to ask a question?
I would like to ask one
Please
question.
don't ask her to reveal,
I will ask one question.
Yes, Farooq, yes.
Priyaji, I wanted to know, why did you, he worked so hard to rescue his wife and two sons, dapper sons who would be his right and left hand. Suddenly, you just got them to disappear after that lady gets into the hospital.
Yeah, please notice Farooq is not saying how.
Yeah,
I don't
know.
Don't say how.
Why did you kill the lady? Kill that?
I agree. I think some of us have the same question too.
Yeah, I had the same question. Yes.
Yeah. So see, the thing is, this is, when my daughter was reading the book when I finished finally, and she was like, gosh, what an obnoxious character you've created, right? So the way I look at it is that I created this character. So initially, I think every writer's, you start out with characters that have no flaws. I started out that way, and then I was like, oh gosh, this is very boring. So I created this character with a lot of flaws. And now, how were those flaws going to get corrected? They were going, I mean, he had to be the good guy eventually. I had to transform him, but it had to be done over a period of time. And so he has to get slapped down hard. He has to get hard knocks along the way to really kind of say, oh shit, I messed up. And so the first one was this. The first one, I really thought about it hard. And, I thought that I would have, some mishap during surgery. But then it wouldn't teach him what I needed him to learn. Like if she, died.
Yes.
So now
The
the people
operation
who haven't
too.
read it know she doesn't die. But if she died, for instance, on the surgery, during surgery, right? I could have done that, but it wouldn't teach him anything. He would he would just people would feel sorry for him, and he would be like, oh, I'm the poor man, and I have I have 2 children to take care of, and so on. And it wouldn't do anything. It had to be something that would wake him up. And I do this to him a few times. I do this to him with Nirmal being such an expert at what he does, and that kind of knocks him down a couple of notches, because he's used to being big daddy. I have Noor kind of take him on and just sort of cut him down. So it goes on in that way till he becomes the man I need him to be.
Mhm. Okay. Yes. Anyone else?
Yeah, I could ask if nobody else is asking or comment.
I just have a follow-up question to that. If it's, can I just,
Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
yeah.
Please.
I want to know, but like, okay, so I get the reason why you took this path is for Gurdev's character kind of building, right?
Uh-huh.
But I want to know, like, because as a reader, I reached the end and I was hoping that at some point there would be some kind of question answered as to where is she? Like, why? Like, she left, yes, but what about her character development? Like, where did she kind of reach after she abandoned this, whatever, however it played out?
So that's where I kind of used my little short story thing where I leave it to your imagination. And needless to say, because of who she is and how I describe her and how I define her and how, she kind of forces herself to keep her mouth shut because she has such an overbearing husband. And she's smart, and there's no question. And I established that along the way, right? In the early pages of the book. But I want the reader to imagine where she ends up. Now, I give a few hints along the way. There is a refugee camp that is only for women and children, which was set up, which was actually that actually existed for women who had lost their husbands, or they just happened to be alone or whatever. So there was a separate refugee camp just for women and children, where they used to lock the gates at night, and you couldn't come in and nobody could come in and go out. So I do mention that. So there are a few possibilities that could have happened, but I leave that to the reader's imagination. And I'm also working on a prequel where I do address precisely what happens to Gurdev's children, because his mother then wants to meet them, and so.
All right. So there's a sequel in the works.
Prequel.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So I just wanted to, in spite of what has been said about questions being raised about why certain things were not followed up or left unclear, I do think that at the end of the novel, Gurudev does emerge as a complex man. He's quite a complex character. None of the others are as complex as he is, but then that's normal because he's the main one.
Yeah.
Your book obviously is Pakistan, India, and Pakistan again. So there are 3, parts to it. Strangely, I wonder whether you ever thought when you were writing it that he wants to take Salim and Sultan from Pakistan to India. And he has in his mind that they are the great embroiderers. So having them would be a real plus point. But also having left Pakistan in a time of tragedy, he still wants to go back, so that embroidery becomes a symbolism for me of friendship. It could be only friendship for the sake of doing better marketing or whatever, but eventually they also decide to come. So there is something more than just money and wanting to take them and so on.
Yeah, so that's the second story, right? So there is, and I think I do even say that there is at the bottom of his, he never shares this with anyone, not, his wife, not Noor. He doesn't share this with anyone, right? What happens in Lahore when he goes to fetch his parents. So there is that in the back of his mind that, I did something and I want to go back and see, what happened, where
Aftermath.
he needs to kind of go back and close that loop. So there is there is that, he did it in a moment of passion, and he has no idea. He's absolutely 100% certain that the fire consumed what it consumed, in both cases, in both homes. He has no question in his mind that anybody would have survived. But there is that at the bottom of his, at the back of his mind, that I want to go and see what I did. I want to go back and see what really happened.
So I just want to add to that. And Priya, you mentioned about it being an adventure and a romance and everything. But none of that comes to mind if I had to speak about Ladies Tailor. To me, it was really about disclosure for him, about his parents, about leaving Lahore. And I think in a way, I mean, when he starts off, his character is flawed and, it sort of irritates, but I think he sort of redeems himself, and there is a sense of closure for the reader as well. So that journey, to me, it's a journey of Gurdev more than anything.
Yeah.
The embroiders and the tailor and everything is sort of just the periphery, but this is to me, is very central.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because it could have been a halwai, it could have been a restaurant of a very specialty kind of it could have been anything that you say, nee, I have to go and get that chef, or that he's the perfect guy who knows how to make just this type of mutton, whatever, so it could have been anything. You're right. But but kind of getting into that, what is it that what is it that they're going to do, was important, because that had to be, it had to be something that you start at this level and you want to take it to this level. So it could have, like I said, it could have been anything, but to take it from this level to this level required some level of expertise that they had to go to Pakistan to get.
I just wonder whether, I just felt that there were some coincidences and surprises, like, finding his parents living in an outhouse, then how they actually crossed over into India. He organized a taxi for them, but actually they crossed, we didn't know. About Akbar the driver. I mean, I just felt that many things happened by coincidence. Am I right in assessing it like that?
It wasn't all coincidence, because I don't know if you remember, but his friend who was living in Delhi, who's one of the people who he kind of says, keep this money for me.
Yeah.
He actually joins the government. He has he works for the Ministry of External Affairs, or that is sort of like, it's there, and he gets a lot of information from him, where the border is open, how to get a passport, and visa was easy, because, and I explained why the visa was easy, because well-off Muslims were welcome to to go to Pakistan, whereas Muslims could not come to India. They couldn't get visas to come to India. Pakistan was readily giving visas. So there isn't as much coincidence as you might think, because I sort of had stepping stones to everything, but you had to find them. It was a little treasure hunt.
Okay. So, like you said that Gurdev is a flawed character. He is indeed, because if you think of him as this very enterprising, confident, leader sort of guy, and he has all these qualities also, right? I mean,
Yes.
his wife follows him blindly.
Yes.
She knows that he will manage to, achieve whatever his mission is and all that. But I like the flaws. I just wanted to say that. His, I mean, the fact that he left Lahore and his privileged upbringing to go off into the rural interiors and marry this woman who is not at all the sort of person that his parents would have chosen for him. It's very intriguing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, why did he do that?
I feel that I don't understand why it happened, but
Yeah.
I guess you don't want us to. You want us to wonder.
There is no
Yeah.
explanation at all. Why did he leave his parents?
No, there is an explanation. Like I said, it is a treasure and everything is there. I spent like, gosh, a long time. But no, so there is an explanation. The explanation is that they wanted him to marry this woman and who was the daughter of a wealthy man. They wanted, to fund a hotel that they would run together. And, so that's the route, because they were landowners. They'd been granted, they'd been given land grants, and oh gosh, I'm digging so much into it for my next book. But so they had a lot of money, cash. They had no business though. And that's what he didn't appreciate, is that all we're doing, we have no business. We're just collecting money from people who can't afford to pay. And so he said he didn't want to have anything to do with that. And he needed to, go out and do, and, it is the privileged who are able to do things like that. If he hadn't been privileged, that's not the road he would have taken. Because he had it all, he was able to actually, he had something to give up.
But at the same time, he then chose to, the village or wherever he went to the rural areas, and yet he married an uneducated, a person whom he didn't seem to be in love with.
Yeah, because I mean, I think at that point, all along, he's presented as this person who's a control. He wants to be in control. He doesn't want, and that's one of his flaws, right? That's who he is. He's seen his father, and he's seen the way his father behaves. And while he doesn't appreciate that, that's something that is in him. And I mean, Noor manages to kind of break it down a little bit, but he marries this woman because it's simple. He doesn't have to do, I mean, he's not going to go back and marry somebody from the city who's educated and so on. He wants a simple woman who's going to take care of him and take care of his house and have his children. He wants to lead that simple life.
Okay, if I may ask, if somebody else, may I ask a question, Moini?
Yeah, sure. But
Okay.
you go ahead and ask whatever.
No,
you
okay,
want.
just to clarify, I've read only half the book, and I find it irritatingly interesting enough to finish the book now. But, but there are two things which are, I don't know, it's something is mentioned in the book, which is, I just want to know if this is kind of factually true. One is, what do you mean by a buffalo whisperer? Is there a such thing as a buffalo whisperer?
There's
Like
a horse whisperer.
Yeah, I know a horse whisperer. What do you mean by a buffalo whisperer?
No, it's just a manner of speaking, right? Like a buffalo whisperer. I mean, she basically is able to, because there's no horses there. It's animals, and they have buffaloes, and she can talk to them and they listen to her. She's the sort of person who, everybody listens to.
No, I didn't ask. No. Is that factually true? Is there something called buffalo?
No, it's a manner of speaking.
No. So it's a horse whisperer. Yes, one knows horse whisperer. So
No,
is there
buffalo
something
whisperer
called
is just a manner of speaking. It is not factually true.
Okay, all
There is
right.
no such thing.
Okay.
So there's no such
But-
term used, but it just means someone who seems to be able to connect.
Yeah.
But there is,
Animal?
1 minute, may not be a term used, but Mohini will support me. We have seen a buffalo listening to her master and waiting for her master to take her out.
Yes,
Right.
yes. That's
Possibly, when he talked to her, go away, and she kind of shook her head and stayed where she was, until he was
Yes.
ready to come out.
It
from
was a
the-
very lovely thing to behold. Whole lot of buffaloes, and this guy leading each one into this lake and scrubbing them, washing them, and sending each one out. And the last one, he sent it out, and then he was washing himself. But that buffalo would not move. And he, couple of times, whacked him and said, "Go on, go on." And that buffalo practically said, "I'm not going without you." And it waited. And only when that master had finished washing himself and was ready to come out, the two of them went together. It was such a charming thing. I mean, a buffalo is far from cute, right? I mean, it's not an animal you would say called cute, but that was cute, no less than cute.
And the second,
So yes,
There
I
are
totally
lots of
understood that
animal
buffalo was
whisperers. There are animal whisperers.
Yeah, there
They
are.
all
There are
have their
dogs.
different,
Yeah.
yeah.
There are. And I
Anyway.
mean, it's a manner of speaking in this case. What is a term that is used is horse whisperer. But what is, I mean, there are dog people who talk to, who are.
Yeah,
who
dog
communicate
whisperers,
with
cat
dogs
whisperers,
and-
all kinds, yeah.
Yeah.
This
They're
is
not
interesting.
necessarily
Very
referred to that as that, but I refer to this because they've lived with buffaloes.
Right.
So she is a buffalo whisperer.
Okay, the second part is is it you mentioned mentioned that the refugees abandoned their babies.
Yeah.
I
That's
did not know this.
Yeah.
If they did, it was a physical burden they were trying to.
Yeah.
And they just could not carry the physical
Yeah.
burden on the walk, the trudge.
Yeah.
Through. And
No,
the
not the
babies-
physical burden. It was the girls. It was the girls they abandoned. The
Right.
girl
So,
babies.
so these were only girl
And
child, the
The girl babies.
girl
Yeah.
babies only
Yeah. This happened.
on
This
a wide
actually
scale, apparently.
Yeah. This happened. This has been written about by non-fiction writers. This was not something that I made up. No.
Wow.
Aruna,
So
what
it's
is
not-
your
I
take on
wouldn't
that?
say large scale. It wasn't like babies lying around all over the place, but there were babies who were found abandoned in the bushes and so on because they, either the mother had been dragged away, ambushed in the kafila, or something else, couldn't move on, couldn't go on, and there were many reasons, but they were babies who had been abandoned along the way. Girl
And they
babies.
were, and they were mainly girls, is what
Yes.
you're saying.
Mo,
Yes.
Aruna should know because Aruna has been writing on this topic and she would have something to say. Aruna?
Would you like to say something? Meanwhile, until Aruna comes on, can I just say, Amy Tan, that novel
Yeah.
called The Joy Luck Club?
Yes.
Well, her character's mother talks about how they escaped from China and when the Japanese
Yeah.
invading the country. And her mother has left her two babies on the road,
Yeah.
hoping that someone will find them because she could no longer carry them.
Very good. Yes.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
It's terrible, of course, but it's so sad that a mother is driven to this degree of desperation that she has to leave her
Leave her
children
baby. Yeah.
behind.
Yeah.
So it's there as well. It's
Yeah.
just that we haven't lived the kind of life where we ever needed to get that desperate as to
Right.
abandon someone we love. But
Right.
it has happened. It has
It has happened. It has happened many times in many places and many times. Yes.
And in the book, Sophie's Choice.
Yeah. In Sophie's Choice, yes.
Can I
Can I-
ask a question?
That's even more horrendous.
Yeah.
Where the mother has to take a choice there.
Yes. One or the
It
other.
kills
Sophie's choice. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that was
Yeah.
terrible.
Just
Terrible.
one little comment, not so much on the book, but on Partition itself. When I lived in Delhi, I met a lot of people, mainly Punjabis, who had left Pakistan and come to India. Now, maybe I met them long after they had left. It could be. But they never went back to those days.
No.
No one spoke about them.
No.
No, they did
No,
not. And
did not.
curiously, there was so much else to speak about what was happening in the country that
Yes.
we didn't dig deeply into their past to know what they went through, if they went through it. And I think my sister will be able to tell also that in our own family, my grandparents and all their children came back after 20 years in Pakistan, you
Yeah.
know. But we also never asked them anything.
No.
And they never referred to it either.
No.
So those who actually, Hamkul,
Yes,
that's
No,
true.
I want to mention my
Farooq
parents,
has his hand
my
raised for a
mother
long
was a
time.
refugee from East Bengal, okay?
Mhm.
And my parents were, and they did go back and forth several times. I have heard the stories because, when we were very young children, I'd ask my mother what happened or whatever, these were all family stories. So we knew a lot, about how they came, and then my uncles would also talk about it. And, they were all very small children then. And my grandmother was newly widowed, and she brought them all over and in the train and all kinds of things. I mean, there are lots of partition stories I know because my mother has lived through it. My uncles have lived through it. My father continued to stay on because he was a freedom fighter. He was in jail. And it was only on independence that he was released. And he stayed on helping all the people who were victims of riots and so on and so forth. So I know a lot of the stories. I mean, I did hear them.
There's one aspect. There's one
Farooq
aspect of the story which
for a
really
long
intrigued
time.
me.
Sorry. Who's speaking now?
And this is Uma speaking.
Yes, Uma, we can't see you.
Why don't you switch your screen on?
Okay. Wait, just a minute.
And Satish, when you speak also, please put on your screen.
I'm not looking so good today. That's why.
See, there's one aspect of the story which really intrigued me. When they were staying in Urmila's parents' house, when they went to Pakistan, Noor and Gurdev, those people came, they were spying on them and they wanted them, they thought they were very rich Muslims, and they wanted them to become Pakistani citizens. Is this really a thing that Pakistan keeps doing? I mean,
they do.
Or is it just
but then that is also based in fact. That was happening then because visas were really easy to get. If you were Muslim and wanted to go to Pakistan, you could very readily get a visa. But if you were a Muslim living in Pakistan and wanted to come to India, you couldn't get a visa. It was impossible.
So they were trying to force them to remain.
Not force them, they were trying to attract the wealthy ones.
No,
right?
it was in India who have to give the visas. Nah, they wouldn't give.
No, to
get
a Pakistani, to get a
and
Pakistani,
they wanted
to go to
them
Pakistan.
to become Pakistani citizens.
Yeah.
This is something which was something, an eye-opener to me. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Coming back into the picture, Moini wants to see my face. Okay, I'm there. What was a couple of my friends, Punjabis, etc., who went very much after the partition. A couple of years senior to me from IIT, and he's a tall, good-looking Punjabi there, and they knew immediately that he was not a Muslim, but they treated. He said that the way I was treated, it was like I was a hero. They would want to give them chai, mithai khilao, ye khilao, and this fellow said I reveled in that. There's another gentleman now who's in his 80s, 90s, touching 90. He went down way back. He was a government officer here, very senior government officer. He went and he also said that when we went back to our hometown, we were given a very good reception completely. It means as if this thing never happened there. So both these guys talked very highly, and there's another group of people.
Pakistani hospitality.
Yeah. And there's another group of people which we at Gyanada had a showing off.
Rahul Chandavarkar's.
Rahul Chandavarkar.
Yes.
We took a group of people to show as a playwright, and had plays all over Pakistan. And again, he talked very highly of how he was treated. And I think there was a period, let's say, post 1971, Indira Gandhi had just come into it. That time, I think there had been a more ease of talking to each other than before that. That's how I looked at it. Because the people who talked earlier talked differently than what Sunil did it or Nakpal was talking about. That's how I look at it.
I was wondering if Mukul had anything to say.
Yeah, I had not something that Latika referred to. I agree with her there that our parents never spoke of those times, though our father, was in Quetta and Karachi and all those places. He worked there and he came away just, in fact, a few days before partition. So even my grandparents, my mother's parents who were there, they came away early, but they never spoke of those times. I don't think they even interacted with local people, what you might call local people. They lived within their community, from what I understand. I had a different question for Priya. Priya, how do you think this story would go down with the current generation who have no idea of what the partition is? In fact, many of them don't even know who's Gandhiji. I mean, who was he?
What?
Where was he born?
Really?
Yeah. I've met some college people. Yeah, we've been told a little about him, but we don't know very much. And then we've got to go on Gandhi Jayanti Day and say this and say that. But I'm just giving that as a reference point to people who've been born, say, in the 90s and something, who've not shared the history of partition except through their history textbooks. How would such an account, part fictional, part, not, that go down with them? What did you have that audience in mind at all?
My kids are 20 and 25, and they both really enjoyed it, and all their friends, I made them read it. But I, in the process of marketing the book, HarperCollins has had a lot of bloggers read the book, and typically they are in their 20s.
He was working. HarperCollins was able to publish it.
HarperCollins published it, yeah. So in the process of marketing it, they provided a copy of the book to a bunch of these very young bloggers, and they offered it. Basically, what they did was I kind of went through, and they wanted a really long, I think 16-17 page excerpt from the book. And so I kind of, dug out a 16-page excerpt, which was posted on this blogger, in this blogger community. And there's hundreds of them. So they read, and if they were interested, they asked for a copy of the book to read and to review. So I got really terrific and very well kind of articulated and thought out reviews from that really young group of people. So I think people, the young are fascinated by, because it's kind of getting into history in a different way. Everybody knows, 1947, independence, partition happened, and so on. But people don't really understand, and that's the feedback that I got from a lot of these younger people, that they don't really understand how lives were impacted and what really went down.
That takes me to a related question, if I may, Priya, that would you think, I don't know about the composition of these young people, but if they were from North India, then the stories that they'd been told or carried forward would be very different from those of us here and South and even further South, because what we understand of the partition was, not for myself particularly, but here, somewhere there happening, at the border. And so what people from, say, the Sindhis or the Punjabis would experience of people living in Delhi with so many refugees coming would be something quite different. Would you not agree?
Yeah, very much. But I got people from all over, and in fact, the last 3 weekends I was in Goa, and I've done 3 book conversations in Goa, and there's a lot of interest in, some people are very frank and say that we had no clue. Even our parents and grandparents had no clue. We were untouched. So we had our own issues with the Portuguese.
Yeah.
But we were not really impacted at all by either partition on the east or the west. So we were, but they say it's fascinating to read about it anyway. And my hope was that and hopefully now, we're like 3-4 months into, into the book being out, that we can pull away a little from Partition and really kind of read the story. But and kind of say, okay, it is set in Partition, but it's also an interesting story.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to understand this. What you just now said, just now what you said is that you began by saying that the book, the Partition is the backdrop and not the main theme as such at all. So now you're telling me, and the conversation for the last 10 minutes has been on the Partition, the backdrop, rather on the character, the style, the way you write, or the way you have projected the characters, the actual story.
Yeah.
Everyone is focusing, and perhaps it seems that even the bloggers who are youngsters were concentrating on the Partition.
They are.
So it's ironic that while you just now said that the Partition is just the backdrop, and everyone is, however, talking and discussing and writing about the backdrop, while your central theme, character, fiction, a story, which I'm supposed to read and enjoy, are now talking and concentrating on the scenery at the back.
Yeah.
Is that what you would? Is that acceptable to you?
Gautam, I think what important thing is that in this story, she is actually written how people picked up their things and started the life.
I have left this Zoom also. I don't know why it is giving me so much problem.
Who's this, Aruna?
Aruna. So I personally feel that the main story, what Priya has written, is how people came to India, and again picked up their roots and again started their lives. The same way that Sindhis did in Ulhasnagar, and the same way the Bengalis did in.
I really don't know what this book is about.
And I want to add to that, saying, Gautam, I think the reason why we are talking more about Partition than the characters, I have a twofold answer for that. One is that it's just so emotive that you just say the word partition and people have so much to say, and have felt so much about it. That's one thing. And the other is that because we don't want to give any spoiler alerts, you see, we have not dared to ask very specific questions because you might be giving something away.
Okay, let me ask a very specific question.
After Gautam, I would like to ask one question.
Please, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
You finish, Gautam, then I'll ask.
Oh, okay. I want to ask a very specific question. Priya, so you know all the different ways of tying a turban?
That was interesting, very interesting.
I mean, you were Priya. I think you were trying to show off your knowledge about how to tie a honey turban, a half turban, soft turban, a trim turban, a well-ironed turban. It went on, and I got very irritated that why am I learning all this stuff?
It's so this is very interesting that it's interesting that you say that. So when I grew up in Ludhiana, and I'm a Sardarni, and I heard
one second, Priya, 1 second. Your name is Hajela. Hajela is also a Sindhi name. I'm a Sindhi. Are you a Sindhi or not?
No, I'm not a Sindhi. I'm a Sardar. I'm married to a UP bhaiya.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Hajela is a Kayast. Also a Kayast name. Yeah, so he's a Kayast from, born and brought up in Bombay, but from Farrukhabad in UP.
Okay, all right. Sorry. Yeah,
I'm a Sardarni, and there were a lot of conversations around this. So there was, and as children, you kind of listen and imbibe so much. Somebody was telling me that I really need to read Deepti Naval's book called, A Country Called Childhood, because, childhood, the kind of things and the way you absorb things is so different from how you do it as an adult. And then when you look back, it's really interesting. So I used to hear people means, my cha-cha or this one or that one. And I'm not, I'm not trying to be push anybody under the bus, but yeah, they would talk about, like that, people want to make themselves look bigger than they are by tying a really big turban. And that, that starched turban was a particular style. And the unstarched turban was another style. It actually was a reflection of your
status in the society.
It was your personal, it was how you saw yourself.
Perceived
Yeah, how you projected yourself.
How you projected, how you wanted to project yourself. So, like we had a relative who lived on the street who and gosh, I heard the people used to talk about it. He was impotent, he couldn't have any children, but his turban was like massive.
Compensation.
It was awful. And I tell you, I mean, I was probably 8 or 10 years old. I heard this and it stayed with me. Because it was like, these are things you just pick up as children. And when you're actually then processing some of these things, when if you want to write about it, it comes back and you're like, oh my God, that's what they meant. That big turban.
Can I ask one question here?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
During the journey from, I'm talking about the early part of the book, so I'm not going to give a spoiler alert. But while traveling the train, there are these two gentlemen Gurudev becomes friends with.
Army.
And in the refugee camp also, these two patient people are there. And I read the whole book and I was waiting somewhere there would be a connect with those two people, but somehow they just...
There was. Because they help his wife.
Yes.
Yeah, they help his wife, but the wife's story has become silent after the first.
Yeah, because there you have to think and
didn't he deny it when he went to charge him? That the
he denied
one of
it.
them.
He's smarter
He
than he looked.
Oh, I thought it was somebody else. But then I was also wondering, the children recognized him and went with him.
Yeah.
So it couldn't
It
have
had
been
to be him.
So maybe in the second book, there'll be something about them probably.
But I really missed Simrat after she disappeared. I rather liked her.
I had this book launch in Delhi, and this journalist, Kaveri Bamzai, we were in conversation with, and she and I had spoken. And, like I introduced this thing about my mother, I had gone into a little more detail about that. So she, in this launch with, 25, 30 people sitting there, she's like, was Simrat your mother? And I'm like, oh boy. Now you're kind of really digging into the, my subconscious here. But I was like, maybe, I don't know, she did a reverse abandonment that we did to her. I don't know, maybe that was...
She's a strong character in her own way.
Yes. Yeah. As was my mother when she wasn't, unwell. So, yeah. So maybe, I don't know, maybe kind of...
But, there can be, I have experienced, I don't know how many others may have experienced too. We're talking so much about partition, which really means division between peoples. But I went to Pakistan at one of the most beautiful moments of India-Pakistan friendship. That was the cricket match. And I was so overwhelmed. And all the Indians who had come from India to Lahore to see the match was so overwhelmed by the friendship that they saw around them. That finally, when I came back, I wrote an article and, I entitled it Gale Lag Ja in Lahore. So much was the hospitality. Yeah. Now, of course, you can't have that. Maybe it still exists between people.
No, it exists.
I think at the per people level, it could still be.
It's the same people.
Could be.
You see, we were, if I can interrupt, we were abroad somewhere and we were having dinner, and the adjoining table, there was another family also enjoying themselves and very similar to us. And we got to talk, and it transpired that they're from Karachi, right? But the way we when we found out, the way we interacted, as if, we were the same. We said it also. We said we're the same people.
Yes,
basically,
Exactly the same thing happened to us in Istanbul.
We have a shared culture, history, civilization, everything.
The food.
Incidentally, Priya, if I may just butt in, since you're doing a prequel, have you read this book called Empires of the Indus?
No,
by Alice Albinia, this one.
no, I'll write it down.
Yeah, because, you know, she's a modern day lady. She says, I want to go up the Indus and see what's what. And she goes on both sides of the border and she interviews and talks to a lot of people. And she talks about the cultures, you know, and what happened to the Muslims who went over to Pakistan, what happened and what were they like before,
Brilliant.
and
Yeah,
so on and so forth. It will probably pad up, you know, a little bit of, might be some research for you for that background and the
Sure, that's
partition.
great.
It's a very interesting book.
Yeah.
Talks about the common thread between these two peoples, basically.
Yeah, because, you know, I unfortunately, I have no visibility into whether people in Pakistan can get my book, because technically Harper has rights for South Asia. So it should be available, but there is no Amazon in Pakistan that I can see where, you know, my book is being sold there or anything. At least maybe on Kindle it should be there, but I have no visibility. I have no reviews from Pakistan. I wish, you know, there would be some, you know.
You'd like to know, obviously, how it's.
You know,
You'd like to know how it is.
I would love to know what they think of it. You know?
One suggestion I can do is there is a Karachi English book club, and they have this Athar Bhai is there who holds this program every Thursday. Let me write to him. Let me send some excerpts of the book, which, you know, we can download. And ask whether he can conduct this book club for us, because they conduct a book club every Thursday at 6:30 Pakistan time. You know.
And he had come and talked to us. Remember, he had joined once before.
No, that was T2F. This is another English book club in Karachi. It's not T2F. That is. The second floor is another, there's more on Urdu, but this English book club is definitely, and I can...
That'd be great.
Yeah,
that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I will send you this.
If they would read the book and you know, and then...
then I can ask him whether the book is available in Pakistan and whether we can have a joint meeting or some sort of a thing by which you can speak about the book. Let me see.
Yeah.
Because I attend their programs and they also conduct similar programs like us. But there are a group just like ours, 20-25 people who come every time, and they discuss. It's all English books only they discuss. That would be a good idea to break.
But Farooq, I've heard this. That I've heard them here. They come to us a couple of times. I've met them.
Not the Readers Club. We have got the T2F people coming.
But on English books, they're talking about English books.
Yeah. I send you. I forward you.
Okay. Right.
See,
so
one thing.
Someone else. I think Mukul wants to speak.
Priya, I wanted to just inform you that my wife is from Pakistan.
Oh.
And I go to Pakistan just before the COVID. I have been going to Pakistan every 2 or 3 years. So I've been to Pakistan about 20 times. More than 20 times. Right from 83, I got married. I have been going very often. And I've seen the change in the people from 1983 when I used to go till today, the way the mullahs have battered the minds of people during the Friday wars, that the whole aspect of India has been so badly battered that suppose tomorrow you ask my brother-in-law, why don't you come to India? He feels that moment he lands in Bombay, he'll be arrested. I said, I have come 25 times to Karachi. I have never been arrested. I am coming smoothly, enjoying everything of Karachi. So the battering of India by the mullahs is so horrible.
So we are doing it now. Now we are doing it now, right?
Yeah.
We are doing it now for the Muslims here, right?
India to hamara dushman hai.
Yeah, no, they have been brainwashed.
It's also the other way around.
I went to school for 1 year in Karachi, and I know what it was like. You know, everything, their history has been rewritten, just like our history today is being rewritten for in school. So this is very normal in all kinds of countries, by the way. It's only when the people leave their country. I mean, we know a whole lot of Pakistanis who once they leave the country, they said, oh my God, we didn't know this, you know.
Outside India and Pakistan, we are good friends. But as Indian Pakistanis, we are...
That's very true.
All of us have stories.
And Pakistan is now imbibing.
In fact, when I went there, I looked at some history books for children, which were being taught. And I discovered that there was a large gap between 2002, and that time we were all one country, to, Muhammad Ghazni and Gore. There's practically nothing said for 1,000 years. And I was quite shocked. I wrote about it also.
Latika, if you go hear some of those Pakistani speak, हमने तो इंडिया को दो बड़ी चीज दिए है, उनको हमने उर्दू लैंग्वेज दी है और ताजमहल दिया हुआ है. That is the way their perception is. So, basically we all talk of being, but we are now mentally going away. India and Pakistan is
True.
But it is being artificially inculcated.
When I lived in Dubai, there was I knew a young, like probably just a couple of years older than I am, a Pakistani couple, and the girl I remember telling me that in the textbooks in school in history, they didn't know, like they were not taught that Bangladesh was there was an East Pakistan and a West Pakistan. And she was just like, because my parents lived through it, I know, but there's going to be a generation of people who don't know because we're never taught about it in school. So that's, that's, and the second thing that I wanted to say is that, but even like, when you think of like, I mean, there was a conversation a little earlier about like, do the kids know about who Gandhi is and who isn't? The problem, I mean, it's not, I mean, it is a problem, but maybe not in this context, but I feel like that's all they know. What they when you learn, like I used to teach history. I mean, it's been like 6 years that I taught history, but when I taught history, modern Indian history was 1947. So we did Chora, and we did, we did Jallianwala, and we did all of that, and that's it. It's like India doesn't have a history from 1947 to present day. What happened after that? So, and that's the only thing, you don't know that. We don't teach that. We don't learn that. And so unless you're reading like India after Gandhi, like for your leisure reading, then what's happening in the thing. But I feel like kids today only know that. They only know up till 1947, and uske baad there's like one chapter for like the Indo-Pakistan wars and the Indo-China, and that just one chapter covers all the wars. So you're kind of just skimming, and then after that nothing happened. Everyone just is so proud about the fact that India fought for independence, but what about the last like 70 odd years? That we're not, no one talks about those.
That's a fact.
Too recent to get a perspective.
Mukul, I think Mukul has a question for a while.
Yes, Mukul wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I've just come back to your earlier point about people not speaking about partition, even if they've been through, especially since they've been through it. And this is very true of women, because Urvashi Bhutalia has done a lot of research on this. I think Stories of Silence or Sounds of Silence. Sounds of Silence. Talks exactly about this, that when she tries to talk to women, who've experienced, who are in refugee camps or women's camps, and they're waiting to be exchanged, or even when they come here, they just refuse to talk. Either the trauma was too much, or so if I link it to what she's been saying, Mevash, and do we appreciate what they've been through or feel for it? And another related thing is, I think because there is so much writing and in English from the West, we know more about the partition here than we know about the Bengalis. I mean, I know very little about
that's
the same
true.
things.
That's absolutely true.
That's something I've noticed.
About the partition there, and I'm sure they went through the same trauma, but we don't have any books. I don't.
No books.
I think Banerjee has a new book coming out called Independence, which is about partition on the.
Yeah, but there have been some very great movies. Satyajit Ray and all the greats, the classical great cinemasters, they made movies on this theme, and the effect that all the refugees faced in Bengal, because Bengal was really overburdened suddenly overnight.
Certainly.
And it had a huge economic impact.
And Bengal had two partitions. One was during 1947, again 1971.
71.
You're third. 1912, partition of Bengal.
Yes.
You're right.
I grew up in Calcutta during those years. I grew up in Calcutta during those 70s,
71.
and
Oh,
I
72
came to
war.
know quite
Yeah.
a lot about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I have I have my theory was that, the thing that that Gurdev did was a bit extreme, but I think that the reason nobody talks about it is not just because of trauma felt, but also some trauma kind of delivered. I mean, people did things that they don't want to talk about ever again. They did things in a moment of, of
Anger or whatever.
anger or passion
or
or
passion
some,
or yeah.
some hatred that kind of rose in
And
them.
also
they're
how
ashamed
many
of now.
Sardar families killed their own women, threw them into wells, I mean, within
Yes.
their own families. So
Yes.
probably
Yes.
that too.
Yeah, so they don't want to, though nobody wants to kind of, go back and
Especially the women, because the stories by Urvashi Vitalia are of women only,
of
and
women.
they refuse to talk about it. But
Yes.
I'm told now that we have a very nice partition
Archives.
exhibition,
Partition archives.
archives,
Partition museum.
museum.
Partition museum and
Where on
partition
this side of
archives,
the
yeah.
border, or they have one on that side, that I don't know. But
No,
it
they
is-
have one in Amritsar, one in Delhi, and they're going to start one in Calcutta.
Yeah,
I
and
thought
the
it was on the
archive,
borders. Okay.
the conversations are
nice
happening on both sides, and they're being
Yeah.
conducted,
Yeah.
from the US and the UK. And
Yeah.
so they're talking to, older people who lived through partition on both sides, which is also very interesting.
Very interesting.
Specific, yeah. And that's where you kind of learn that people not only experience things, but they did things, which, at this age in the 80s and so on, some do talk about it, but not many.
You
And also
realize,
an entire archives to preserve letters from both sides, which are extremely touching. When
Yeah.
somebody ran away, then somebody else from another community occupies his house, and then he writes because he has this address. Say, is this you? I'm so and so, and I've occupied this. Then he says, "Please, I left this. Take care of that. Those are my mother's letters." And that's how two Hindu and Muslim families become friends. Urvashi
Right,
Vitalia
okay.
specifically
So I think
mentions
this
this.
has been a good session.
Yeah.
And as expected, we talked a lot about the partition. That was bound to happen. I mean, the first thing that I noticed, that Priya had said in her book or about her book is that it is set in partition, but it's not about partition. It's about a different story that happened during that period of history. But it is such an emotive topic that we are bound to talk about it, and we did. But I think it was a very rewarding session, Priya. I'm so glad you joined us. We enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, everyone who participated, all those of you who listened. Thank you for being here. And Priya, above all, thank you for coming.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for inviting
Thank you.
And now let me just tell you about what's happening next time. So our next session is on the 4th of December. So, next Sunday. And we have Kaveri Narang talking about the Tomb of Sand. So, of course, we are very proud, that we won that International Booker for a non-English language book translated into English. And we are very proud and therefore very interested in this book. Some of us participated in a buddy reading section, scheme, and we have read this together. And Kaveri, I think, read it with such insightful interpretation. So it's wonderful that she agreed to present the book. So we're really looking forward to that. Then on the 11th of December, we have Mukul, who's here today. Mukul talking about a North Korean writer's book, The Hard Way Out. And I've just begun to read it. It looks so interesting. I mean, I think always these books about areas that we know very little about turn out to be so fascinating. So I'm absolutely fascinated by the book. So we look forward to these. And then we have another author, Tejaswini Apte, who will be joining us thereafter, and so on and so forth. So thank you, everyone, for being
Thank you,
here
Moini.
today. Thank you, Priya.
Thank
And thank you, all of you. And the last word goes to Farooq, of
Before
course.
you sign up, next Saturday, we have a program on mountaineering. There's this guy called Umesh Zirpe. He has assisted more than 8,000 plus peaks, including Kanchenjunga, Mount Everest and all. He's going to speak about his journey in the last 40 years in mountaineering. So please join next Saturday, on 3rd at 7:30. And on 24th, we are having a program in Gyanpedia on honeybees. So there's going to be a gentleman who specializes in honeybees and how honeybees as an important aspect of the nature cycle, the very interesting thing on Gyanpedia. There are 2 programs from Gyanpedia. That's it, 3rd and 24th.
Okay, looking forward. All right, so good night, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next Sunday, 4th of December.
And watch
Thank you so
Facebook.
much.
This program is recorded, and I'll be putting the link on for the Facebook now.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
All the
Good
best.
night.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.